The interview started like any other: soft lighting, gentle laughter, the usual questions about films, fame, and the complicated beauty of Hollywood life. But no one expected Dakota Johnson to say what she did that afternoon. Sitting across from the journalist, dressed in understated elegance, Dakota was calm, almost detached. The conversation turned to 50 Shades of Grey, the film that had defined so much of her career, and, unavoidably, her connection to Jamie Dornan. She smiled, nostalgic at first. But then her tone changed. "There's one mistake Jamie made," she said quietly, pausing long enough for the world to lean in. "And it's something I'll never forget. Maybe I forgave it, but I never forgot." The room fell silent. The interviewer blinked, unsure whether to push further. Dakota's expression didn't waver. It was a mix of strength and sorrow, the look of someone remembering something that still hurt. When pressed, she simply added, "Some things change how you see people forever." Within hours, that line was everywhere. "Unbelievable. Dakota Johnson reveals Jamie Dornan's unforgivable mistake," screamed the headlines. Social media erupted. Fans who had adored their chemistry for nearly a decade were in disbelief. What could Jamie, the famously polite, grounded, family-oriented actor, have possibly done that Dakota would never forget? Clips of the interview flooded TikTok and YouTube. Some slowed the footage down, searching for meaning in Dakota's eyes. Others analyzed her words like detectives. Was she speaking about betrayal, a professional conflict, or something deeper, emotional, personal, hidden? The mystery consumed everyone. But those who remembered their history knew there was more beneath the surface. The two had shared something extraordinary on the set of 50 Shades. The chemistry between Jamie and Dakota wasn't just acting, it was an emotional trust built through vulnerability. They had spent years baring their souls and bodies in front of cameras, navigating some of the most intimate scenes ever captured on film, all while under the pressure of global scrutiny. "They needed each other," said one former crew member. "There were moments where it was just the two of them against the world, cameras, directors, media, all watching. They learned to read each other's silences." But fame changes everything. By the time the final movie wrapped, both stars had grown in different directions. Jamie was focused on family, fatherhood, and restoring a sense of normalcy. Dakota dove deeper into her craft, chasing more independent, artistic roles. Somewhere along the way, the connection that had once felt effortless began to fade, and that was where the so-called mistake began. Rumors soon resurfaced from old interviews, piecing together clues. Years ago, Dakota had hinted at a rift, saying, "There were days when I felt alone on set, even though he was right there." At the time, no one thought much of it. But now, her recent confession cast those words in a new light. Sources close to the production claimed that during the final months of filming, tension had quietly grown between the two. Jamie was under immense pressure, one insider said. The media, the judgment, the expectations, it got to him. He became distant, maybe without realizing it. And Dakota, who had always been emotionally open, felt that wall go up. Another member of the team described a particular day on set when Dakota had a difficult scene, a raw, emotional sequence that left her shaken. Jamie wasn't there for her afterward. Usually, he'd be the first to check in, to make her laugh, to bring her back. But that day, he just walked away. He didn't mean harm, but to her, it felt like a betrayal. If that was the unforgivable mistake, it wasn't grand or scandalous. It was heartbreakingly human. The moment someone you trust forgets to stand beside you when you need them most. As the interview continued to make waves, fans split into two camps. Some defended Jamie fiercely, insisting it was unfair to judge him over something vague. Others sided with Dakota, saying she had every right to feel hurt. The debate reignited years of fascination with their relationship, the blurred lines between on-screen passion and off-screen connection. Meanwhile, Jamie himself stayed silent. No public response, no clarification. That silence only fueled more speculation. Was he protecting her? Was he ashamed? Or did the truth hurt too much to revisit? By the week's end, One entertainment outlet published an anonymous quote from someone close to Jamie. "He knows exactly what she's talking about," the source said. "And he's carried that guilt for a long time." The story had evolved beyond a headline. It had become a mirror, reflecting two people bound by a shared past that neither could escape. Dakota's voice, calm and unwavering, still echoed across screens. "Some things change how you see people forever." And though no one yet knew the full truth, one thing was certain. Behind that sentence lay a wound that time had never quite healed. The world wanted answers. What was the unforgivable mistake? What could have fractured something so seemingly unbreakable between Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson? A bond that had withstood fame, pressure, and years of speculation? As headlines continued to flood every platform, Jamie remained silent. For days, his publicist issued the same response: no comment. That silence only made the story louder. Every gossip outlet tried to fill in the blanks with their own version of events. Jamie betrayed her trust. They fell out over control on set. Dakota wanted more, and he shut her out. None of it was confirmed, but it didn't matter. The narrative had already taken a life of its own. Then, unexpectedly, Jamie spoke. It was during a radio interview promoting his latest project, far removed from the chaos of tabloid speculation. The host, careful but curious, brought up Dakota's recent remarks. "She said you made a mistake she'll never forget," the host said softly. "Do you know what she meant?" Jamie paused. The air in the studio shifted, the kind of silence that feels fragile, heavy with meaning. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low. "I know what she meant." The host didn't interrupt. Jamie took a breath, as if weighing every word. "You spend years working that closely with someone," he began. "You build trust, you rely on each other, and sometimes you take that for granted. I did. There was a day." He stopped for a moment. "A day when she needed me to show up as a friend, not an actor. And I didn't. That's on me." He didn't elaborate, but he didn't need to. His tone said everything. The unforgivable mistake wasn't betrayal or scandal. It was absence, emotional, not physical. The kind that leaves a mark deeper than anger ever could. The confession sent a different kind of shock through fans. It wasn't the dramatic reveal many expected. It was quieter, more human, painfully real. Social media shifted overnight. Instead of accusations, there was empathy. "We've all done that," one user wrote. "We've all hurt someone without realizing how much they needed us." Within hours, Dakota responded indirectly through a profile piece in Vanity Fair. When asked about Jamie's interview, she smiled gently. "I think it takes a lot of courage to admit when you've hurt someone," she said. "But I never called it unforgivable because I wanted to punish him. I said it because, for me, it was unforgettable. There's a difference." Her words changed everything. It wasn't bitterness. It was honesty mixed with understanding. "We both went through something unique," she continued. "And sometimes, when you share something that intense with someone, it's impossible to come out of it without a few scars. But those scars, they remind you that it was real." That admission, more than anything, brought closure to years of speculation. The unforgivable mistake wasn't about betrayal, but about humanity. About how even the closest connections can falter under the weight of fame, exhaustion, and misunderstanding. A week later, both actors found themselves at the same charity gala in Los Angeles. It was the first time they had been seen together since Dakota's interview. When photographers captured them greeting one another, a warm embrace, a few quiet words, a shared laugh, the image spread like wildfire. It didn't look staged. It looked peaceful. One reporter who attended the event later wrote, "There was no tension, no bitterness. It was as if two people who had been carrying something heavy for years finally decided to set it down." In an interview afterward, Jamie was asked how he felt seeing Dakota again. He smiled faintly. "Grateful," he said. "Some people come into your life to teach you something. Sometimes you don't realize the lesson until much later. But it's still a gift." Dakota, too, was asked about that moment. "We've both grown," she said. "We were kids when we made those movies. Now we're just people who understand each other better. I'll always care about him. That's never changed." And with that, The story that had dominated headlines for weeks quietly began to fade, not because it was forgotten, but because it had finally been understood. In the end, the unforgivable mistake wasn't a scandal or a betrayal. It was a reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how powerful forgiveness truly is. It was the story of two people who had lived under the harsh light of fame, stumbled, learned, and still managed to look at each other with respect. As one fan perfectly summarized online, "He hurt her. She forgave him. They both healed. That's not Hollywood. That's real." And maybe that was the point all along. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable stories aren't about secrets or lies. They're about love, growth, and the courage to face the past with grace.